I'm Laura McNamara at the 2026 Fuel Ethanol Workshop in St. Louis, Missouri. Joining me now is Robert White. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Sure. Robert White, Senior Vice President of Industry Relations and Market Development for the Renewable Fuels Association.
And you were on a panel this afternoon talking about the situation with E15 in California. It was October of last year when the state legislature unanimously voted to allow sales of E15 in the state, but it has yet to happen. It has yet to be implemented. So can you tell us kind of where we're at right now in California?
Yeah, it's being simply held up by a little red tape, if you will. Stage 2 vapor recovery, which is a boot on the end of the nozzle when you fuel your vehicle that captures the vapor from the fuel as it enters the vehicle. Unfortunately, is a unnecessary requirement because the vehicles that would be approved to use E15 have onboard vapor recovery, a system that a lot of people don't realize is there. And unfortunately, those two systems tend to compete. And so there's a chance that we're actually releasing more vapor into the air than if it didn't exist. But California has been really hesitant to remove that requirement. They are the last state to require it. And there's no equipment in the stage 2 or no stage 2 vapor recovery systems that are approved for E15 at underwriters' laboratories. And the statute and fire code in California require UL listing. So all we've been trying to say is they could use enforcement discretion. They could use various opportunities that they do at stage 1 and other pieces of equipment that they use at gas stations to allow E10 certified equipment to allow E15, because all of those systems were tested on E15. It's just they were listed at E10. And the state fire marshal has dug in. They don't seem like they're ready to move. And so 6 months later, almost 8 months later, here we sit.
Well, and you were talking about, too, how California is pretty much primed and prepped to really, really adapt E15 because they've been big adapters of the E85, and you were talking about a lot of success stories there.
Yeah, California has such tight regulations around the fuel retailers, so they just implemented their tank program. So all the underground storage tanks as of January 1, 2026 had to be fully upgraded. And so other than a couple hundred tanks that really had to be put out of commission and shut down, have all been upgraded. So almost the underground infrastructure is all E100 now. And then you get to the dispensers and the piping and that type of information, you're looking at a minimum, an E15 level, but most of them are E25, some of them are even E40. And you go across the country, we don't have that luxury, but California is so far ahead of the game. And then you layer in the economics. I mean, it's just prime is almost an understatement for California, but the infrastructure is way ahead. And then you look to upstream and the fuel terminals, and I mean, every gallon out there is 10% ethanol. So the fuel is stored in its pure form. It's only blended when the truck shows up to deliver. They punch in a code, whether it's E85 or E10, simply a different code for E15. So there's nothing to do at the terminal other than a computer code. And so even the infrastructure upstream is ready to go.
Okay. And you were talking about, too, like some people were kind of surprised to find out that the flex fuel vehicles there's still a big use in California. All the old ones from anywhere else in the country are going there, and they're really, I wanted to say eating them up, but they're really, using them and searching them out because they're saving a ton at the pump using the E85.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that, in Kansas City, I think the biggest discount I can find is 80 cents, maybe $1 discount on E85, and you go to California and $2 or $3. We even saw a $4 discount in Glendale, California a couple weeks ago from E85 to regular gasoline. And part of that is, everything that California adds on to their gasoline. There's $1.20 in taxes in California on a gallon of gasoline, where, we're around 50 cents here. So there's a lot there. But nonetheless, if you can save 10 cents a gallon, people drive out of their way, let alone $1 or $2 or $3 or $4. So flex fuel vehicles are definitely in high demand, and we're seeing more and more E85 stations being added. They just crossed 650 in the state, and it's has all the environmental benefits and all the other benefits that come along with E85. You just get the bonus of the price, and price is what drives consumers to the pump.
Absolutely. And then going back to regarding E15 more broadly, we are in the summer driving season now and dealing with waivers from the EPA once again to allow the sales in summer months. Can you explain that situation in depth and how it works and why it's necessary? What do you think the realistic chances are that this will be the last summer we have to have such waivers?
Yeah, I mean, when E15 was being approved by EPA, they did not extend the 1 pound waiver that E10 has enjoyed for decades because they had planned to address it in a different regulation for E10, and that never happened. And so E15 has been put on a different playing field despite having lower volatility than E10. It's actually better. The smog forming compound, all of that is better than E10 in the summer months, but yet it's treated and almost victimized in the summer months. When you read the headline that, well, it needs an emergency waiver because of smog forming concerns. Well, it's better than the fuel that's already there. It's not. It's just education on that. Those types of things is terrible. And so for the last several years, they've given emergency waivers because Congress has not got the job done and allowed legislation to be passed to allow year-round E15 sales. So this year, finally, there was a vote in the U.S. House on E15. There were some additional things beyond year-round E15 in the bill. But it was a strange vote, to say the least. Not only did the Republican leadership not push it, the Democratic leadership did not push it, and you basically had equal votes from both parties, and this bill passed. So now it's headed to the Senate, and it has not been filed yet because leadership, Leader Thune, is trying to decide how to approach this, because if you do it wrong, it could die a slow death in a wrong committee. And so we think there'll be some action in the coming weeks, but at least leadership is talking about it. You hear Senator Thune, you hear Senator Grassley, and all the while President Trump is saying, where is this legislation? I'll sign it as soon as it comes to my desk. So the odds are better than they have ever been, for sure. We don't know if it'll get reattached to the Farm Bill on the Senate side, but it will need a mechanism to move. It's not going to be a standalone legislation. It just won't work in the Senate. But it's promising. It's for sure better than 50-50, and we'll take that right now. But it's got to get fixed. It is truly holding up investment from the fuel retailer side of things, because think of anything in your life. If you can only do it 8.5 months of the year, how much are you willing to invest on it? And that's whether it was a Slurpee machine or a new coffee machine at the gas station, whatever it is. 8.5 months a year is a tough sell, and that's what we've been facing the last 14 years.
Well, and I'm curious too, why do you think there's this continued misinformation about the E15?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a couple things. It's just the anti-ethanol crowd, whether it's market share from, the other end of the gallon, right? They don't want to lose any more market share, or, just those that are against production agriculture in general, that, they don't want more corn turned into, or more corn produced, or corn produced at all. There's always that crowd. So I think it's just attaching on to the heartstrings and pushing that, when, a true environmentalist knows the story that the more ethanol, the lower the volatility, the more oxygen going into the air, the cleaner the air is going to be, the more biodegradable you're going to have in the gallon. There's just so many things there, and all the while the farmers are hurting. The farm economy is terrible right now, and more E15 would create more market, and that's what they're asking for. They're not asking for more checks to come in the mailbox. They're asking for market, and E15 is right. Whether it's in Washington or in Sacramento, E15 is the answer to a lot of problems.
You also did a presentation here at the conference on turning policy into market reality, insights from 2 decades of U.S. ethanol development. So what were some of these insights you shared?
Yeah, it was really taking a lot of the conversation we're talking with foreign governments about, how we started with the Clean Air Act, how we went to reformulated gasoline, ultimately getting to, the renewable fuel standard, both 1 and 2 in 2005 and 2007, how MTBE came about, how MTBE was banned, and then, what led to E15? Why did we file that waiver in 2009? And really just trying to help not only, this was an ethanol 101, so remind some people how we got here, how E10 became the predominant fuel, but for a lot of newbies, it's also educating them so they appreciate that this didn't happen overnight. It was not an easy chore. It was not simply because of price. It was a hard-fought battle that was led by policy. And today we had Ozzie Smith, a Hall of Famer, former St. Louis Cardinals player, in our booth, and I spent 10 minutes with him before we started, teaching him about ethanol and teaching him about the RFA. And he said, where did RFA start? And I said, in 1981 in Washington, D.C., because the only way you were getting ethanol into gasoline was if it was policy, because the market share was dominated by the petroleum industry, which it still is today. And the only way you were going to get into that gallon was with a little help from Washington. And unfortunately, that's still the case today. Price, obviously, we can compete very well, but it still takes a little help from Uncle Sam to get there. And once we have access, which is what this year-round E15 is all about, once you can get access to the consumer has that option and can use price to make that purchase.
And you talked about the long journey, a hard-fought journey, but there's been some fun moments. You just spoke about Ozzie Smith, and you've also been to the Indy races, and I remember the American Le Mans series as well. So it's been an interesting journey as well for ethanol.
Oh yeah, there's definitely been some fun along the way, and still is. I mean, we just announced our partnership with the Professional Softball League and the Kansas City Diamonds team that's getting ready to kick off their season next week in Puerto Rico, of all places. So, yeah, there's a lot of fun along the way. You have to teach the masses and educate the masses, but it's not without a lot of growing pains. When we were doing the IndyCar series and American Le Mans, I don't want to date us, tell people how old we really are, but that was a long time ago, and to see how much the industry has grown since then and matured, and the technologies that are down here on the trade show floor, we couldn't have dreamt them up. And that's an exciting piece of all of this is, we used to just make a little ethanol and distillers grains and CO2, and now the various products that are coming out of these facilities, what they're doing with less inputs, and ultimately where the products are going well beyond the fuel tank, and where they're going to go in the future is not only rewarding to be a part of, but it's exciting at the same time.
Excellent. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
If people want to learn more, obviously they can always go to our website, which is ethanolrfa.org.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Robert. I'm Laura McNamara at the 2026 Fuel Ethanol Workshop in St. Louis, Missouri.